Dude, why is the 7th gen still on the lift?
Well, because really we need to do a 7th gen. We need to show people how it's done, go through all the minute details.
Yeah, but it sucks.
I swear to God, I got a plan. I think even you'll like this car. Welcome to VTEC Academy. He's about to get schooled.
All right, so you have a plan for this?
I have a plan. I want to make an EVO killer. Out of this thing. I want something that is fast, handles well, and we can go out hunting EVOs with it.
Are EVOs strut cars also?
Similar strut cars, yep. They're strut cars like these are. And actually the EVOs are like even older technology than this. They didn't make really any changes to suspension since like the EVO 7.
Okay.
So 7, 8, and 9 are pretty much all the same. So even though this suspension is like an RSX, which isn't ideal, or like an EP3, which by the way Top Gear liked, I think we can make it handle. And I think with the right engine, we can go out there and stomp on EVOs.
Okay, so I'd be cool with that.
Okay.
How are we gonna do it?
Well, first of all, K24 swap. Second, boost. Gonna have to have boost. There's no way just a K24 is gonna be able to go up against an EVO, a turbocharged EVO. Secondly, we're gonna do E85, and that's gonna help us maximize the boost out of our supercharger. So with those things as a start, I think we're off to a good start, and we'll see what we can do. I have suspension on the way for this. We're gonna do a 5-lug swap, but first we need to do the engine swap and get it tuned, see what it can do.
So we just did the Linus Tech Tips car,
Yeah.
which is pretty much the same car. What's gonna be different about this versus that?
First of all, we're gonna use a 5-speed transmission because with a boosted motor, I like to have a little bit longer gears. So we're gonna switch to a 5-speed transmission. I think that's gonna help with acceleration because we're not shifting all the time. Now, one of the other things we're doing is we're going to run a 3-inch exhaust out the back. I think that the exhaust that we had on their car was a little bit restrictive, although that was basically straight through and loud as could be.
It was so loud.
It was so loud.
Remember that you could hear it on their live stream.
Yeah, exactly.
I understand. Oh boy.
So loud, but I'm shooting for like 300 horsepower. So in order to do that, I'm gonna need a 3-inch exhaust. So that's different as well. Something else is the 5-speed transmission we're using is not like the one they have. Theirs is very close ratios because it's out of an EP3 or base RSX. Ours is out of an Accord. So that's got longer gear ratios, and I think it's gonna be a little bit better for what we wanna do. That's gonna require some different parts. So if you want, we can go back here and kind of look at some of those parts.
All right.
These are some of the parts that are going to be needed for the swap. So let's kind of go over some of the differences here. We're using, again, a Hasport mount kit. This one's called an ESK4 mount kit. One of the things that's different is this driver's side mount. This goes on top of the transmission. This is what you use for the RSX transmission, the 2012 Civic Si transmission, 2nd Gen TSX. That's what's used for that. For our Accord motor, or if we're using, say, a TSX 6-speed, we would be using this mount right here. This is what bolts on top of the transmission. The rear bracket is different also. With the Linus Tech Tips motor, that was an RSX base model transmission or EP3 transmission. You're able to use the stock RSX rear bracket. We can't use that for ours. So we're using this Hasport rear bracket that is designed to be used with the Accord transmission. Also works with the TSX transmission, the 2012 Civic Si transmission, and stuff like that. This bolts onto the back of the block and reaches down to our rear mount right here. Next is the shifter. The shifter is different. So this is an RSX shifter. You notice when I push and pull this lever, it's pushing and pulling this particular cable. This is the one that actually changes from first to second and third to fourth, et cetera, et cetera. This right here is the one that kind of moves the shift fork back and forth so it affects the gears you want to affect. This is the one for the Accord transmission. If you notice, the cable, the push-pull cable is underneath. So what's happening is it's working opposite. So when I'm pulling on the lever, it's pushing the cable, and when I'm pushing, it's pulling the cable. So this is what's necessary when running the Accord transmission. It doesn't quite line up the same. If you look at these the length's okay there, but it's slightly wider. So we're going to have to make some adjustments inside the car in order to compensate for that. I haven't decided if I'm going to do an offset bushing or possibly just drill new holes. One way or another, we'll get it in there. Next is the grommet. This is the grommet that goes out the floor. This is for an RSX. It happens to be the same for the Civic. So when you put RSX cables in, that grommet pops right in, seals off the bottom of the car. Now, for this one, you can see it's a different style grommet. I actually made this plate. This plate goes over this opening right here and has the correct shape in it. So this is what seals out the bottom of the car when you pass the cables through. Next is the electronic power steering. This is a hydraulic rack. We decided to go with EPS. The reason is we're using an EP3 supercharger, and that actually eliminates the power steering pump. So we had to switch over to electronic power steering. Part of that is the electronics that go with that. There happens to be a different fuse box. This is the fuse box for electronic power steering. And this is the fuse box that comes in the stock Civic. Okay, right here is where we have our fuse that runs the electronic power steering. There's a 60 amp fuse that goes right there. So that needs to be in there. So you can get the correct fuse box out of a hybrid Civic of the same generation, 2003, 2005, or you can get it out of the EP3. We happen to get one out of an EP3, and it's in the car. I'll show you that to you in a minute when we go look at the rack. For the moment, we're going to be running the stock header, and this is actually an RSX header. So it comes out and is divided at the end, and we're going to be using an RSX catalytic converter. Why are we doing that? Because this is a street legal car, and we want to make sure that it passes all the emissions controls it needs. One of the things we have to do with this, as soon as we get it running, is we need to get it through emissions. So that's something that we have to do pretty much immediately so we can enjoy driving it on the street and going and hunting EVOs. Another item that's necessary for this engine swap, of course, is the RSX subframe. Now, you do not need the lower control arms from the RSX as well. The stock lower control arms will bolt right into this RSX subframe, no problem. We're not going to be mounting a front mount because the Hasport mounts, even though there's only 3 of them, do a really good job of holding the engine steady. If that worries you a little bit on the front mount, I would just go ahead and buy a stock mount, because really the front mount is more of a travel limiter than it is there for holding the engine, supporting the engine, so to speak. By the way, if you're drag racing this vehicle, perhaps you do want a front mount to just add a little bit more stability. In that case, Hasport actually makes a front mount for this. It's very stiff. The problem with running that on a street car, though, it's going to add a lot of vibration. Once you tie the front and rear down, it just gets really unbearable with the amount of vibration that's in the car. But if it's a drag car and you live in life 1/4 mile at a time, it's not a bad idea. So this is what we did in order to convert this to electronic power steering. The rack looks very much the same. The major difference is this big motor that sits on top. And you notice there's actually kind of a divot up here for that already. I don't know if you know this, but this particular chassis, as it comes in Malaysia, comes with a K20 and comes with electronic power steering. Anyway, this particular rack is out of a EP3, and I suppose you could use a hybrid one as well. They're different part numbers, and that may have to do with possibly a different steering ratio, but that would work in here as well. Next thing is the wiring. There's a sub harness, as you can see, going in through the firewall right here. We had to drill this hole for this grommet, and inside is an EPS brain that is controlling everything. On top of that, another wire had to be run through here. You can see this cable right here. This cable is for our power. It goes to our 60 amp fuse, which is up on top. What you might wind up doing is harvesting this wire out of, say, an EP3 or a hybrid car in order to transplant it in your car. By the way, when you switch these fuse boxes, everything plugs right in like it normally would. Now that one connector is going to be missing unless your car was equipped with ABS. If it's equipped with ABS, it actually has that connector in there. You would just need to add the other terminal. If the car that you take this from does not have ABS, then you're going to need to go ahead and find that connector as well. And you would find it on a Civic with ABS, an EP3, a hybrid car, any of those. The width of the rack is the same, so that doesn't really matter. It just bolts right in and everything should work as it does. There are some connections that go between the EPS brain and the computer that's in the car. If you fail to connect those, the car will run in, let's say, a fail-safe mode all the time, the EPS will, so it'll give you like full assist all the time. If you put the, if you connect the wires up as you should, then it's gonna work more effectively and you'll get a difference in the way the EPS works depending on, that's speed dependent, which is a little bit more how it's supposed to be, and that acts more like a hydraulic power steering unit would work. We'll have a diagram available from the VTEC Academy website that lets you know all the wires that you need to connect and where they should go. And basically, I'll probably just give you a copy of the wiring diagram for the EPS, so you know exactly where everything goes. So on Honda K-Pros, when you use these, there's actually a function in the computer in order to switch your computer from looking at the power steering pressure switch, which is right here, to looking at the EPS input. So, and that's changeable on your programming of the K-Pro ECU. So that makes it easy as well. Works really effectively that way. Eventually this car is going to wind up with air conditioning, unlike the car up in Canada, which really doesn't need air conditioning. So we will be going over in a later episode how to do air conditioning in this car as well. This car was originally an automatic, so we're going to talk about the wiring changes that make the clutch pedal work with the starter, make it so the key doesn't get locked in the cylinder. In order to get ready for the Linus Tech Tips video, we had a K24 installed in this car and it was running. So we dropped all that out, shipped it off to Canada, but now this is pretty much ready for another engine. So let's get this in there. I want to drive this car around. One of the modifications we had to make was to what's called the hood latch support. That's this bar right here that goes on the bottom. The normal one actually came up right here, and that wound up being in the way of our radiator fans. So with the original D17 engine, the head and transmission are swapped sides. So this needed to be the large size for the radiator fan, and this needed to be the small size for the condenser fan. So this support kind of went over, was offset over here towards this side a little bit. We needed offset over there. This is our new radiator, and actually our used new radiator. This is out of an EP3. As you can see, the larger fans over on this side, this is the radiator fan, this is the condenser fan. So they're kind of swapped places. So as I set it in place, you can see my bar comes down here. It used to come right here and it interfered with the shroud. So rather than cutting the shroud up for clearance, we just move this over. I think I'm actually going to make this out of aluminum, make it kind of cool and swoopy, and maybe offer that for sale. It bolts in using some existing holes. These are the two holes we had to drill out the spot welds on the bottom. These two holes were existing already. When we slam our hood down, this will support this so it doesn't bend down and it'll latch properly. All right, this is our rear bracket. The rear bracket is a Hasport product and it takes the place of the stock rear bracket. We have to use this because our new transmission is not the same as the one on the RSX. This will allow us to connect up to the RSX mount, which will be mounted to the RSX subframe. This is a lot easier than it was at Linus Tech Tips. Although Hasport provided all the hardware for them, I kind of like the factory style hardware, and I have bolt bins full of this stuff. I don't know if you guys can see this. These bolt holes are slotted. That's to allow the engine to kind of shift right and left a little bit. Not all these old cars are dead straight anymore. So when we put the bolts in, we're going to leave them kind of loose so that we can shift back and forth. That way, as we put the subframe on with the engine in there correct, once that's done, then we can start tightening up the mounts. The Hasport brackets are designed to allow us to flip the motor. Normally the head is on that side and the transmission on this side on this particular car, but now we're doing a K-series, so that puts the head over here, the transmission over there. This bracket allows us to do that. It bolts in with stock bolts. So there's two of the short bolts that held the motor mount on. They're going to be used here. There is a bolt that normally would hold on the battery bracket. That's going to go right here, and another one that's going to go up on top here. Once those are bolted in, it's nice and firm and ready for our mount. The driver's side bracket, again, is held in using the stock hardware. Normally there'd be what they call a pillow mount over here. It's a hydraulic mount with an upright post. It bolts in with the same 3 bolts that hold that in. This other bolt right here is actually used as a ground. That's why it's not tightened yet. It's just kind of in there loosely. Now I have the motor mount on the engine, and as I come up, I'll kind of guide it into this opening, and then I'll bolt it in at that time. And that's actually going to help me align the motor a little bit. All right. We got the engine bolted in right and left. We're now going to put the subframe on. We left the rear mount off because the engine may need to shift right or left, and if I put it on now, it may be difficult to line the bolts up. So anyway, we're going to put it up real quick, and we're going to screw the bolts in just a few turns on each one so the rack hangs down a little bit. Next, what we'll do, put in the rear mount, shift the engine right or left, whichever way you need to do that, connect the mount to the rear bracket, and then we'll screw it all home. Yeah, we need to move it over about half a bolt hole. There we go. Well, we could probably do all the stuff from the bottom. I was gonna have axles built today, but Scott isn't here, so we'll have to do that tomorrow. We can still get it running, but I don't want to run it without oil in the transmission. I don't want to run it, and I don't want to put oil in the transmission without axles in the transmission. At this point, we should tighten up all the engine mounts. This is the stock fan. Someone, probably me, pulled off the connector off of our EP3 fan, so I just pulled it off here, and I'm going to go put it on that. In. All right, I put the lock. The radiator we're using is from an EP3. It's barely taller, but it works. The hoses we're going to be using are from another setup I had. Now, K-Tuned actually makes hoses for this. They make a really nice silicone hose that comes out, dips down underneath our throttle body, and then back up to here. I'm going to actually go over top of our throttle body. So I'm going to be using a B18 hose and just shortening it, so like a 94 Integra hose. On the bottom, we're just going to be using an EP3 hose. The front end is the same length as an EP3, so with an EP3 radiator and a CRV bottom end, which has the outlet pointing down and to the side, that hose works perfectly. So this is in, and the only other thing I'm going to have to do is I'm going to have to make an extension for our cooling stuff. This is our condenser fan connection, and over here is our radiator fan connection. They're opposite. I need this to come over here and this to come back here. Now, shorter doesn't matter, we'll just flip it over. Longer, I'm going to need to make an extension to reach over, because right now it's about 12 inches short.
No comment.
That's what I say.
How many centimeters? 30?
I turned it off after I left Canada.
Sorry.
The install that we did up at Linus Tech Tips used some really cool stuff from a company called K-Tune. K-Tune's been doing K-swap parts for quite a few years, and they make some really cool stuff. I mentioned earlier when we were working on the Radiator, they made radiator hoses, custom radiator hoses for this particular application. They're silicone, they're really nice, but they make a bunch of other products too. Since this swap is kind of related to that, and after looking at some of the cool stuff they have, I decided I needed some of that K-Tune goodness as well for this swap. So let me show you what we got. First off, this car is boosted, so we have some things related to the map sensor. This is a map sensor remote mount, so we can move our map sensor away from the engine. We can't use the normal map position up on top of the throttle body because it won't actually see the boost of the supercharger, so we need a remote mount. This is a plug to plug up that hole that was on the top of our throttle body. The next thing we have is hose for doing that with a couple of nipples for moving stuff around. We also have this. We have the map sensor, boost map sensor that's available from K-Tune. And in the past, I've used them from Honda, but these work really well as well. This is a 4-bar map sensor, and that's far more than we need. They also sent me this other one. This is kind of a cool one. This is a stainless steel 4-bar map sensor, a little bit different construction. I'd be curious to see if it uses the same connector. Looks like it does. More on that when we're actually installing it. By the way, that looks like it's a remote map sensor mount. So many things to consider. I guess I'm gonna have to read up on this stuff. More on that later. All right, next we got some of the cool stuff too. This is our spark plug cover. They make a really nice one out of sheet metal. It's got the K-Tune logo on it, and it has hardware for mounting it as well. The little spacers you need, some nice bolts, everything you need to put it up on top. One of the other things we got was this really cool cast throttle body that they make. This is based on the RSX throttle body. It's much bigger though. As a matter of fact, it's 72 millimeters. So a lot of things I think limit a supercharger from how much horsepower it can make is oftentimes the size of the throttle body. You don't want too small of a throttle body because then it requires too much horsepower in order to draw the air you need through the throttle body. All right, on top of that, we also got this. Woohoo! A color coordinated, K-tuned fuel rail. This is going to match nicely with our spark plug cover. Very cool product. We are going to be using E85. This course works fine with E85. We also are going to be changing the fuel line so we can have an E85 sensor. This will make that much easier. Now, one of the other cool things they had was the RSX style shifter for the car at Linus Tech Tips, and I wanted something like that too. They just happened to make one that uses like our Accord shifter, so a little bit different configuration, but it does what it needs to do. So when this is set up properly, now our push results in pulling the cable, and our pull results in pushing the cable. So this is just what the doctor ordered. This being aluminum with these nice big openings, I should be able to make some offset bushings to go in there in order to bolt it down into our stock mounting location, and that should work out really well too. Man, this thing is solid and beautiful. It's almost a shame to cover it up with a boot. Maybe I'll leave it open. To go with our shifter, we also got the K-Tune shift cables. These have the brackets like you would find on a 2003 to 2007 Accord or a TSX. So these work as stock replacement. If you have that car, And in our case, because this transmission and this is a shifter we're using, they'll work for that as well. Also got a few dress-up parts. Check this out. This is their oil cap. Once again, a nice black finish to go along with our spark plug cover and our coil cover, and also our fuel rail. That's nice. Again, they have this magnetic dipstick with the flexible dipstick line. These things are really cool, the way they attach in there. And because we're running boost, they also sent this. This is a dipstick retention kit. Now you may think a dipstick retention is something about holding a student back, maybe a grade because they're not so smart, but that's not what it's for. It's for boost. Anytime you pressurize your engine, some of it will bleed past the cylinder walls or the rings, and you wind up with a pressurized case. So if you don't have proper ventilation on it, it could blow the dipstick out. So that's a good thing to have as well. We also have this super sexy shift knob to go with our shifter. That should look great in our interior. Has a couple different styles of boot holders on there. This one is for holding a boot, and this one is if you have no boot going on there. I still got to decide whether or not I'm going to use a boot, because I don't know if I want to cover that thing up. And last but not least, we have this K-tuned idler pulley. Now, in all reality, we really don't need this, but had I not been putting the supercharger on, this would have been necessary. Because I have EPS, I would have needed an idler, which of course goes up on top of the engine, and your belt routes up over it. It's much prettier and nicer than the one that comes on an EP3, and because I have a K24, I would not have had this. So you can buy these at K-Tuned as well. Super sharp part. I may just keep it and put it on one of my other projects, but very cool. And of course, I have plenty of K-Tuned stickers, so I can put one on each corner of the car and have one left over for my toolbox. All right, so we got the shifter in. We're now going to put the cables in. One thing I haven't figured out yet is what I'm going to do to insulate the outside from the inside so I don't get a bunch of dirt and stuff coming up through the bottom. I'm going to wind up taking one of the old grommets. I'll have to look, see if I have any damaged or cord cables. If I do, I'll probably just grab those parts and put the grommet here and put it on the underside of the car. But these things are pretty dang deluxe. So we're going to install these now, get them in the car, and test the shifter. Okay, this is my plate that's at some point going to get put right there. Oh, got it on backwards.
So that doesn't look right.
That's because it wasn't right. That'll screw on there, and it'll be used with the stock grommet. So I do need to find a kind of a set of haggard cord cables that I don't care about. Take the grommet off that and put it in here. So the cables are clipped on, and now we need to push this section of it back in there. Then take our holder and put it right there. A lot of the shift cables use clips. These don't. These actually have kind of a Bolton's deal going on. So rubber goes in the hole, and that gets bolted down like so. What I did with the shifter was I machined out a slot for the bolt hole. I went a little farther than I needed to. On top of that, I made these. I made these washers that have an offset center hole, and these will drop right down in there, and then you screw the bolt down and they will hold it down. It's not mounted in rubber like they are stock, but what I'll probably do is put a small rubber washer underneath the whole thing just to kind of insulate it so it doesn't rattle against the floor. All right, this piece is kind of interesting. It's got a bit, it looks like it's got a universal design. This mounts in 2 spots, and this has a different style pickup over here. So it may actually work for a couple different shift cables, because that's not the connection we have on this. This requires a post. So we'll change that out. Those extra parts came. Also, this bracket can mount in 2 different positions. So we will get these things tightened in here and see what we've got. This actually has kind of a short shifter adjustment. I don't know if you can see these 2 holes down here. For a 6-speed, you need more movement right and left. So use the bottom sets of holes because it'll give you greater range. For a 5-speed, you should be able to use the top holes. In my rush to use my brain, I didn't use my brain. I like a challenge. You can tell because I create challenges for myself all the time. Put a shift knob on that puppy. The most important part, the pièce de résistance. All right, we have all the gears. I have a 5-speed shift knob. No aspirations for a 6-speed, I guess. All right, that was a little more work than I wanted, but all is done. That was a pain in the ass. Mainly because I didn't put all the little accessories on first, but had I done that, it would have been a breeze.
You did it so other people don't.
Yeah, I screwed it up so you don't have to. I do need to find a grommet. I'm going to do that real quick. We're initially going to set this up with a stock. Oh, another bolt in there. We're initially going to set this up with a stock exhaust header and catalytic converter to get it through emissions, and then once it's through emissions, we'll look into an aftermarket catalytic converter. See what choices we have. This K24 seems like it's really close to our brace. So got it. We have a 3-inch that was built by Full Race about, actually it was built by Future Fab about 15 years ago. Yeah, maybe close to 20. We'll use that one. Even though this is a K24, we're using the RSX or Civic Si style intermediate shaft. It's shorter. Using the Accord one would actually require a custom axle, which we can do, but I don't think we've ever measured it for this. I don't think we've ever tried one in here. I wonder if it'd work. I'd have to try sometime, but not today. All right, we made axles. Hasport makes axles. These are for this car. They're essentially EP3 axles, base RSX axles, and K-swap axles for ESK. Brand new joints. They're all tight. Try smacking it one more time if you want. Oh yeah, now it clicked. Home. Yeah, one more weight. K-Tune makes a really nice heater hose kit, and I didn't get one, but I do have probably every size and shape of heater hose here. So I thought I could just find something that would work. So that's what I'm doing. Find something that'll work. This is gonna work. So this is actually a generic hose I buy on Amazon, and what's cool about it is this side is 5/8 and this side is 3/4, and that's what's needed for this. On this end over here, I could probably just kind of curve it on there, but I'm not sure it would. We'll see if it kinks. I'll try that. Most of these hoses are molded, so when you turn the corner, they don't get kinked. We'll try curving the corner on this one and plugging it on. And if it works, cool. And that's a little too close to the header. Let me shorten it a little bit more. Let me shorten it too much. I think that's gonna work. So I actually have a plan B as well. If this didn't work, I have a right angle, 5/8 to 5/8. I would have used that. The reason I don't want to use that is it's 2 extra hose clamps. I didn't want to do that. This is our K-Tune 72mm throttle body. This, as you can see here, has got some holes that aren't perfectly round. They're kind of slotted. This is a universal throttle body. It'll bolt on to the Accord throttle body, the 2012 Civic Si. It'll bolt on to the Accord manifold, the Accord, the RSX manifold, the EP3 manifold, probably even the CRV manifold if you want to. Well, obviously, because it's the same bolt pattern as the RSX. It will also bolt on to the RBC manifold, RBB manifold, the Type R manifold, and the 06 SI manifold. So it'll bolt on all those. It has comes with a gasket that has the same kind of universally slots in it. All right.
Looks like a thermal gasket.
Yeah, it appears. I believe this is a gasket for insulating. So anyway, that's cool. This is the idler control valve. Not everybody chooses to hook this up. Some people will like do a block off plate here and not even do that. But this is how the a K-Pro controls idle. So it has a little motor in here that passes air. Okay, that basically these ports, one of them's on the front side of the plate and one of them's on the back side of the plate, and that's how air gets through in order to set the idle, so to speak, on these vehicles. Now, this part is going to come off of your stock RSX throttle body, unless you don't have one. Then you're going to need to find one. From Honda, new, these are like 375 bucks. So the best place to get them is actually on CRV throttle bodies, because CRVs are all over in the salvage yard. You can usually pick up a throttle body for pretty cheap. Or if it's a pick it yourself yard, you can just go in there with a screwdriver and a Phillips head screwdriver and a 12mm wrench and pull it yourself. I happen to have several of those throttle bodies, so I just pulled one off. Oh, by the way, that throttle body is the same throttle body that you would find on a, you find on a base model RSX as well. So that's where you get them. One other thing, don't take apart your RSX throttle body to take this off of. Go get a CRV one. Keep your RSX throttle body complete and sell it off to somebody for 250 bucks, because that's what it's worth. Stock, it comes with this gasket. There's like grooves in here to use the gasket. There are no grooves machined into this. So what I'm going to do is just kind of smear Honda Bond on the bottom of this, around these edges, just to and just glue it down with Honda Bond.
Dude, you're using Honda Bond? And look, my shirt.
Have you been dreaming about my Civic?
I have not been dreaming about any 7th Gen Civics.
I think you have.
Maybe when we're done with this one.
Yeah. Should mount like that.
Does it come with new bolts?
Yes, it does. So this one would go there. I have to change these hoses.
One needs to go to the bottom?
Yeah, one needs to go to the bottom. I think what I'm going to wind up doing, because I think on the CRV they come out like this at an angle instead of one just pointing straight down.
And this one can't just go be changed that way.
Might be able to.
I don't know if that'll come around.
I don't think it's quite long enough. I think what I'm going to do temporarily is just stick them together for the moment, and then come back to that later. Particularly if it's cold weather, it doesn't want to idle properly at the beginning, then I'll worry about it then. Am I not able to find the hole? It wasn't a problem when I was younger. You do it sight unseen.
You're just out of practice.
Clearly. All right, as you guys may be aware, the fuel system is a dead-end fuel system on this. So this particular line, this is the fuel line for this. It's 1/4 inch quick disconnect, and you can actually purchase from K-Tuned a fuel line kit, and basically what happens is it has a little 1/4" adapter to dash 6, then you run a dash 6 line around the edge and into your fuel rail, and then it would dead end there. This fuel rail actually goes on a different car, so we're going to be pulling it off and using the one from K-Tune. Now, I actually decided I wanted to do something a little bit different. I'm going to be setting this up for E85, so I need an E85 sensor. So I'm going to mount that over here. So that means I have this dash 6 adapter, just like the one you can buy from K-Tune. This one's from K-Motor. It's going to do a 180 into the flex fuel sensor, and from the flex fuel sensor forward to this end of the fuel rail, and then it'll dead end there. So to start with, I've got these little 1/4" adapters. This attaches on here positively. This little holder screws on to prevent it from coming off. That's the lock mechanism. We'll probably use a little bit of Loctite on that. Then I'm going to get a 180 dash 6 barb fit or fitting, some dash 6 line, and we'll set up the 85. I'm probably not going to do that to start it up, but I will do it to actually run the car before we get it tuned. Because we're going to be doing E85, we need bigger injectors. So I gave AUS Injection, which is actually a local company here, a quick phone call and asked them what kind of injector it's going to have. I want to make at least temporarily about 300, 350 horsepower. So they set me up with these injectors. These are actually probably good for quite a bit more than 300 horsepower, but they're a good start. They come with adapters so that I don't have to change the plugs, although I may change the plugs anyway. But we're going to go ahead and put these in our new K-Tuned fuel rail and install them on the car and get ready to make big horsepower. O-rings are delicate, and sometimes fuel rails don't have a great chamfer on them, so it's always a good idea to lube them up with a little bit of silicone. Okay, that part is done. A little extra lube. I probably could have just spit on it, but the silicone works better. All right, we're going to need a much smaller spacer this time around. If you don't have AN wrenches, the next best thing is an AN crescent wrench. All right, fuel rail installed. We're back to work on the 2005 Civic, and we have just a list of things we need to do. There's a bunch of small things that need to happen, and this is going to be the tedious part of the job. We need to build our fuel lines, we need to connect our vacuum lines, we need to connect our radiator hoses. Right now, there's a bunch of things we need to do on the wiring harness. I just made a new sub-harness for the injectors. Now, this connection right here isn't something you would normally find. We did this with this particular harness because we were putting a bunch of different injectors on it, so I'd make a new one of these sub-harnesses every time. Turns out I don't have these plugs, so I'm going to have to make another adapter harness at some point here in the future. We have adapters going to our 1000cc injectors from AUS Injection. I decided I'm going to go ahead and change out this upper radiator hose mount. It has no air assist valve connection on it, and actually I think I want that. At least that's going to be good for emissions. If it turns out it's not friendly with the supercharger, I can always plug it up, but I want to go ahead and run all the emissions control devices on this. So in the process of replacing that, Scott found us a starter, is connecting our clutch master to our clutch slave. We'll be bleeding that shortly. We actually were able to find all the hard lines we needed on another transmission out there. These hard lines are cheap, by the way. You can buy, any brand slave cylinder. You can get a K-tuned one, a factory one, a Dorman one. Exidy is the one I like to purchase if I'm not purchasing OE. But he is installing all the bracketry and everything so that that's normal. We do need to find a clutch reservoir. I just noticed ours is broken off. So we'll need to find a reservoir for that. That may require a trip to the salvage yard. Hopefully I have it on something out there. Let's see what else. We have the harness that needs to be fed in through the firewall. Once that's done, we'll also need to connect it to our adapter harness. I'll show you more on that. We actually built an adapter harness. There are other companies that make it. We wanted to have one that had the secondary O2 sensor on it, and I wanted to include the air-fuel ratio sensor into our engine harness, so I did that. Need an accessory belt. Oh, battery tray. The battery normally mounts over here in this car. 2002, when I originally did the swap, I mounted the battery down here on the subframe. In fact, you can see the 3 nutserts I inserted in there to do that. Then I mounted it in the back of the car with that particular car. I'm going to go back to mounting it on the subframe right there. In fact, what I'm going to do is I'm going to make a battery tray. I made one for the Linus Tech Tips car, and I think I want to do the same design for this right here. I'm going to make it like the one that was done for Linus Tech Tips, so I probably won't be using those nutserts, but no big deal. I'll just put them where I need them, and we'll fix that up. I find that you can put a nice 51 size battery down there, so we do also need to make custom battery cables for that as well. We'll need to connect from the battery to the starter, and from the and also from the battery to our fuse box. Then we'll also need to make a line from our fuse box to our alternator. So, and connect the grounds. I know I'm forgetting stuff, but that's why I have this huge long list here of things to do. So we're going to get to it, and hopefully we can fire this thing up by the weekend.
Oh, gross. That rust inside there is not concerning, right?
We'll flush it out. I mean, no, because the water passages are...
People will be like, oh, it's silly, but...
Yeah, it's not that concerning. I mean, obviously, it's going to reduce the cooling abilities, but we'll flush it out a few times and check the radiator and make sure it still flows. It's funny, this car, when this engine was in Carter's car, it never had an overheating problem. So, and it's been sitting ever since then. So I don't anticipate it having an overheating problem, but we'll see. So, like I said, we'll run water through it a few times and flush it out. And if it's a problem, then we'll solve the problem. I'm tapping out. Perfect. A little, oh, now I gotta buy a new one. Get a little Honda Bond on there. Just to make it sticky. Anytime you can eliminate those little rubber caps that always go bad, it's a good idea.
So which alternator is this?
This alternator is off of a CRV.
Okay.
I believe it looks like our Accord motor has a CRV water pump on it. And they're different. The offset's different on these. So if you wanted to use, like if it was actually had an Accord water pump, I would have looked for an Accord alternator. You could use the other ones, but you have to make an offset bushing to change it.
How many different alternator styles are there per K series?
Probably 4. Well, actually quite a bit more than that. So with the first generation of K series, you have the RSX style one, the CRV style one. The EP3 is the same as RSX. The CRV is slightly different, but they're interchangeable. Those 3 are interchangeable. Then you have the Accord and the TSX style ones. Those are interchangeable. And So, and I believe the TSX and Accords are essentially the same. Then later on, you get to the newer style where they have the bolts go this way instead of that way. And that's on like the K24Z models, and they come on like the CRV and the I'm sorry, 08 Accord, what is it, 13, and then the 09 TSX to 14 or whatever it is. So, and those are not interchangeable. Although some of the water pumps are interchangeable depending on which engine. I don't remember exactly how that works, but some of the water pumps have the same bolt pattern and you can just change them. Then there's also the JDM motors. So some of the JDM motors come with the K24, the K24As that have the 3-lobe VTEC. Some of them, the bolts go like that, some of them go like that. With the ones that go like that, you can change those water pumps and get the other style get the other style of alternator on it if you want. Otherwise, you wind up, I think, using like a CRV alternator if it ever goes bad.
No, Scott, you're spectacular.
I'm a sucker.
A sucker sucking a sucker?
Yeah. Oh, you're sucking my will to live.
All right, this thing is mega dirty, so we're going to use our antique parts washer. This will heat up the water, getting warm, and bathe it in warm solvent to remove all the grease. Hopefully it won't damage anything else. I mean, these things are run externally in a engine bay, so hopefully, and they get very hot, so hopefully the heat from this won't do damage. So, but we'll soon find out. That should keep all the water inside, or solvent. I'll probably come back 30 minutes to look at it, and then if it's not clean yet, give it another 15. I looked for a grommet that I could remove from some cables that I wasn't doing anything with to put them on here. And what I found was a grommet off some fit cables. They're so short, you would only use them for a fit, and I don't have any fits with stock motors, so I cut it off that. And I cut it on the two sides, so I should be able to tuck this in, and that should hold it together. You know what I mean? And keep the majority of the weather out. The only thing I'm seeing now is these shields are a little bit on the thick side, so I may trim this shield back, and then I should be able to, because the opening's not that big for that big of a shield.
But it might stretch with the...
Well, no, it'll just gap. It won't stretch. I mean, it might stretch if we glued it together and then slid it in place, but I think it's just easier to cut it back, cut these two back equally, and then slide this into place, and then put the grommet in place. Should work. We will soon find out. I think this particular grommet from the fit is not the same size as my hole. This hole was designed for the Accord. So what I'm going to do is cheat. I'm just going to screw this right up like that, and it'll pinch the grommet in between the plate and the, oh yeah, for sure. That's what the problem is. It'll basically just pinch the grommet in here, and it should give me, 8% of a seal, which is good enough for this project today.
Do you think if you were gonna kill something besides Lancer Evolutions that you would need a better seal?
A better seal? Oh, I thought you said steel at first. I was like, I was confused. No.
What if we're...
It's only a Lancer.
What if we're...
It's only a glorified Lancer.
What if we were killing...
GTRs?
GTRs.
Yeah, maybe. All right, let's take a look, see what it looks like. I did come over and flip it over a little while ago. Whoa. Okay, it got warm this time. That looks good.
Steaming hot.
Steaming hot. I think I'm gonna need some gloves. That looks pretty darn good. Now it's got to dry out. Luckily, we live in Arizona. It doesn't take much time. There's a gap. Now the question is it lying flat? Yes, it's lying flat. We have a gap up top. Clearly, this is not the right alternator. Well, I'm gonna go get an Accord alternator. Well, my Accord one doesn't fit either. It has a gap here at the bottom. So I'm wondering if the real problem with the CRV one is the body's too large. And that's what's causing the problem. It's actually making contact with the water pump and it's pushing it out slightly. I don't want to change the water pump, but I do need to look at it and see what the deal is. Because if the problem, yeah, I don't understand. Could very well be 3 different ones for this early style stuff. But that would be news to me. Anyway, I'm going to keep investigating. All the pulleys line up the same. It's this offset between the lower mounting surface and the upper mounting surface. Like on this particular one, when we put the CRV one in there, we had a gap at the top. Now I had no idea that there was another offset. I thought you could interchange the CRV and the RSX. But apparently that's not the case. So my question is it a question of, is the body interfering with the housing, or is it really a third offset? So I'm gonna bring that one back and see if it's making contact possibly on the back side, like maybe on the water pump right here. And that's actually where my issue is. The solution would then be to change the water pump, which I am not going to do. I would have to pull the supercharger to do that. Instead, what I'd do is put the Accord one on and just make spacers for it.
So there'd just be 2 small spacers at the bottom, right?
Right, exactly. And I might even have a set, because I've done several of the alternator relocation kits from K-Tuned, and they probably have spacers that are the correct size. Okie doke. I'm gonna go back and get that one more time. I may have found the problem. Okay, I'll show you what it is. The CRV alternator interferes with the tensioner for the EP3. So what I would need in order for this to work is either grind that away, which I'm not going to do, or find an EP3 alternator, or find a RSX alternator, or put the Accord one on there and make 2 spacers for the bottom. So that's what the solution is going to be. Spacers. All right, problem solved. There is only 2 types of offsets for these things. There's the Accord style offset and the CRV/RSX/EP3 offset. By the way, the Accord offset also is the same for the 06 Civic Si, the 2012 Civic Si, and the K24Zs that have the front-facing bolts, that kind of stuff. So, problem solved.
Now, can we get that time back?
No, we can't get that time back. But we have knowledge now. Knowledge that we'll probably never use again, because how often do we put an EP3 supercharger on an Accord block with a CRV head?
All the time today.
Yeah. Found some AC bolts that are quite a bit longer. In fact, slightly too long. Nothing a washer can't handle. Sweet. Cross it off the list. Wasn't even on the list.
Let's cross it out.
All right, belt. I used to use electrical tape here, and it never cut as clean as I wanted it to. This time I used electrical tape, but I used cloth electrical tape. Worked a lot better. I like that a lot more.
You have to modify something down there.
No, you just gotta put it
Oh.
in.
No, it
No,
was in
no.
the hole, and then I lost it. Uh-oh.
Then-
There we go.
Is that what she said?
Oh, they changed it. Hell yeah. Thank you, K-Tune. That's awesome.
Yeah, it's
Magnetic to that, and then you get a big old pull.
That's cool, because now you get a pull handle.
that makes it so much nicer.
It pulls out linear now, because over here you're side loading, and
Mm-hmm.
that's neat.
Still got the hole for the retaining spring. Square. Centered, squared. Good.
Now we need a better valve cover.
Yeah, we do. We'll get a color. Ever seen my wrench that was loaned to people working on an electric car? That's a lot of voltage going through that. Okay, this was bent in the car, so we're gonna have to bend it back straight. Take my little pair of pliers,
The small ones.
small ones. There we go. Very clear. This is our wiring harness that was actually, it's been a kind of like a test harness for a while. It has the VSS, it has a reverse lockout. This is a 5-speed Accord transmission, so it doesn't have either of those. But what it does also have is this countershaft speed sensor. So that's what's going to be feeding our dash, which means it's going to just be pegging the dash. It's going to be putting out way too much. We do have a K-Pro in here though, and it will output the correct speed signal. All right, so I need to pull the ECU out. This is what's crazy about this whole thing. There's a metal bar underneath here that needs to come out, but that won't even be good enough. This plastic piece, which Honda actually recommends that you cut out when you do service under here. So I'm going to cut this piece out, take this bar out, and then I can slide the ECU out. Lovely.
See? 7th gen, worst gen.
No, it's out. I am going to put this K-Pro ECU into this case that bolts into the car so that we have, screw that. I'm going to mount this where I can get to it.
Yeah, so I was just gonna
Yeah.
say, it was kind of hard to...
It was
Take
such a
this
pain in the ass to get it in and out. I can see myself wanting to get it out for numerous reasons, so the heck with it.
Like
I'm
if
just,
you were gonna set it up and just leave it for the next foreseeable future.
yeah, which ain't gonna happen.
Yeah.
I may wind up, whatever. Yeah, not gonna happen. At some point we might have to bolt on a few brackets here and there to hold the harness. But for day, that'll work. It's just gonna interfere with this. It rubs. How fun for me. All right, so we're looking at our throttle body with the supercharger, and this is kind of in the way. This would normally feed our EACV, and then there's a return line back out. So I suppose if we had that hooked up, it would be better. Oh wow, that's twisted. That's not supposed to point in that direction. It's supposed to point straight out. I don't even see it. Looks like it's a little bit collapsed there. So I'm going to bypass the water from this, but what I'm going to do right now is go ahead and pull this hose off, straighten that out so it's not where I don't want it. You know, it's so funny how once you feel like you got about 80% of the work done, you're going to spend like 80% of your time doing that last 20%. Superfast Matt had an interesting take on it. He was talking about how then you do 80% of that 20%, and it's going to take you 80% to do the next 20%. And he says it never truly gets finished. It just becomes good enough at some point. That's good enough. You know what? Before we do this, let's try this throttle body on a J-series manifold, because if it fits, that might be my solution for a larger manifold, because I believe they have this throttle body with the electronic throttle setup available with the same bolt pattern. That'd be kind of cool. That would allow me to get a big throttle body that was electronic that I could use on J-swaps. So let's try it out. So one of the things I was looking for was a larger throttle body for our supercharged drag car. And I was curious if the bolt pattern was going to work, and it does. So this throttle body, if it's available as an electronic throttle body, would basically go right on and all the bolt holes line up. So this, an electronic version, would give us a significant upgrade. This is 72 millimeters, and this is about, I think, 62.5 millimeters. Oh, 64.5 millimeters. So that would give us quite a bit more. And we'll have to see if it's available with 75 millimeter and electronic. That'd be sweet. Might be able to uncork some more horsepower of this thing. I think that's one of the limiting factors, is getting air into the engine. The supercharger is sucking as hard as it can, but it needs a bigger opening.
Like a boba straw.
Like a boba straw, exactly. Want to get those beads in there. You can probably eat McDonald's French fries with a boba straw. Those things are huge. When you have an oversized throttle body, the flange nuts generally don't give you enough room to work with on the side there. You'd wind up putting some sort of a machined, clearance area there, and that winds up weakening the wall of the throttle body, which probably doesn't make a big difference except if you're boosting it quite a bit. So I think that having the Allen bolts is a good idea. And if you have the right tool, it's particularly easy. All right, let's go ahead and install our throttle cable.
Our throttle cable is
A K-tune throttle cable.
Oh, we have a K-tune one. Okay.
We do. So everything should work exactly as it should. It's funny, it looks generally just like an OE cable would look, the only real difference being the fact that it's got this center section here that you can use to adjust slack. So not only do you have this area to adjust slack, but you have this area as well. Oh, EPS is going to make this difficult. Our adjustment's a little bit out, so let's do a few things here. Let's do that there. Bring that off there. Okie doke, I'm going to jump in there and push the throttle cable, and you tell me if it's working. Going all the way? Sweet. It's a boosted engine. We need a more than 1 bar map sensor. This one is a K-tune 4-bar map sensor that would like thread into a bung. This one I am not going to be using. I might use it later for a turbo project we have, because having it positively thread in is actually a really good idea. I will be using this style of 4-bar map sensor. So this comes with a remote mounting system, because we can't have it on the throttle body because it's an aftermarket throttle body from K-tune, which doesn't have a port for it. So we got their remote mount adapter. This has place for, by the way, this came with their vacuum lines. This has some vacuum ports that just will thread in like that. Then I will connect the vacuum line from this to a place on the manifold that's already there. Then this bolt will come out, but this will mount in right like that. And then it has both an M8 and an M6 bolt that countersinks in there. So you just find a spot on the engine that you can bolt this to, and you're all ready to go. Remote setup for map sensor, and pretty slick set of solutions they have here. I really like it, so time to put it on. I think I'll mount it right there. Little zip ties on there to hold the pressure. Good to go. My favorite part of any of these builds is always working under the dash. One of the things, because of this supercharger and idle air control valve we're using, we're gonna have to extend the wires to reach around there, so we're gonna work on that right now. I went ahead and clipped off the wires, actually at 3 different lengths. That way I can kind of stagger the joints so they're not making the wiring harness bulge right there. Plus, if one of them was to wear through its insulation, it's less likely to short with one of the other ones. So we're going to work on that right now. If you ever look at how Honda joins things in their harness, this is what they use. These tiny little, looks like just part of an open barrel terminal. They use that, stick the 2 wires in and crimp it down. Normally I would use all fresh wire to make something like this, but what goes in the fuse box has a particular shape, and I need to make sure that I use the right shape. Otherwise I'll be making crimp-on parts that are probably a little bit too difficult to make. So this should, so I'll start with this wire. This should make it a little bit more doable. I believe it was out of CRV. And all the CRV, the Accord, the Civic, any of those have these leads on them, but they do have to be the Honda leads. No, there it is. This one's keyed because it slides in this area right here. So this one, normally the battery would be, well, this fuse box would be over there, and this would be very close to the battery. So this is the one that feeds battery power to this particular terminal. I need a longer wire because I'm going to be mounting the battery over there. Or at some point what will actually wind up happening is I'll wind up mounting the battery, I mean a breakout box right here. And in that, when I do that, I won't have to worry about what we're doing right now. So this other cable will reach all the way around to my battery. It looks like also I can use, so what I'll probably do is I will probably get another one of these same cables right here that will reach all the way to the battery, and I'll make that my cable that feeds the battery, because you can put this on either side. You can only put that other one on one side. So I'm going to find 2 of these, and I just got to make sure that I put this one that goes to the battery and the other one goes to the alternator, because at some point what I'll do is I'll change this. I think I'm going to wind up putting the battery back in the bag. I want to put it right here just to develop the battery mount, but the reason I don't want to stay here is because I want a cold air intake for this car. So this is going to be a temporary solution. We'll have to see if we can figure out how to make these cables so that we can have something for people to use. One thing that could happen is you could cut this area out and you could just feed cables straight in. That's if you're, participating at home. With me, I just need to make sure that I mark which one goes where and understand that this is the one that is for the positive battery cable and this is the one for the alternator. Now I don't have to remember. Here we go. There we go, alternator. Here we go, battery cable. Now all is needed were these little crimpers. Try to fire it up. You want to crank it? So let's see if it was our map sensor.
Ready?
Ready. Oh yeah. Great. By the way, we put stock injectors in, and we actually they didn't want to click, did they?
Not at first.
Yeah, not at first. So what we did was he actually put 12 volts to them and tapped them while you were doing it. Is that correct? Mm-hmm. And eventually they freed up. So we're running on stock injectors as well. Well, now that we know it fires up, I think we should bleed the clutch and take it for a little test drive. Although, now I'm thinking we might want to put the 4-bar map sensor and the other injectors in, just because we know it'll run. Or should I just do that at the dyno? Yeah, I'll do that at the dyno. All right, let's bleed the clutch, and then we can take it for a little test drive. It won't make too much boost, because as soon as it does, it'll go in limp mode. But we're there.
Yeah, that sounds a lot better.
That sounds a lot better.
That sounds almost normal. It sounds like open header now. Oh yeah, let's put the exhaust in it too. The EP3 front end is a little bit taller, so I needed to cut out this little section of the hood on our sedan in order to clear the supercharger. Two things about that front end being taller on the EP3. The radiator we used was an EP3. It also interfered slightly with the bumper, but I was able to just kind of force the bumper cover over top and attach it down so that although it rubs, it fits. Okay, so we got the car wired up, at least enough to run. We fired it up once before with the other engine before we went off to Linus Tech Tips. Now we have our supercharged K24. Remember, this is a CRV motor, so it's a base model. It does actually happen to have camshafts in it. These are, I'll have to look that up. More on that in the next video. It does actually have aftermarket camshafts in it. I happened to get a set from two companies that were making them. I have one set in one car and another set in this car. I need to make sure I give credit where credit's due. But it's got an old Jackson Racing supercharger, so I need a new calibration, so I'll open up new calibrations in my K-Pro Manager. I'm hooked up to the computer right now, although I need to turn the engine on, or the computer on. Hopefully it won't beep. We are connected to the computer. New calibrations. We are going to look for Civic SI, because that's where I'll likely find the Jackson Racing supercharger. Here we go. We have a Civic SI with Jackson Racing 440s. You know what? Let's look at the Type S and see if we have a Jackson Racing with that. And there's a reason for doing that. The RSX Type S ECU tunes actually have more choices for me. So let's see what we got here. Race header, RSX, ITB, stock. Jackson Racing supercharger, 9 PSI calibration. This will actually put out about 9 PSI, so let's go ahead and choose that. Okay, we've got that in here now. What we need to do is change the fuel injectors. Our fuel injectors are not, these are 550cc. These are 650cc. So let's do 650. Let's see what else we've got here. We want to go to our multiplexer. And multiplex right now is set for normal, because we do have it hooked up to this. Next, let's go to map sensor. We have a replacement map sensor. Ours is a Honda 4-bar, so we'll select that. Next, we're going to go to miscellaneous. Immobilizer is not enabled. Secondary O2, fuel tank pressure Pressure air, ELD, those are all enabled because they're hooked up. Purge system enabled, it's hooked up. ELD enabled, it's hooked up. We're going to invert EPS and PSP because we have electronic power steering this rather than power steering pressure. So let's invert that. We have a countershaft driven speed sensor, so we're going to select that. And we are going to do speedometer correction, but I'm going to save that for another video. But we do need to know that it's countershaft driven and it's going to be very, very high. All right, so there's that. Now, I believe we should be able to just go ahead and upload this program. Actually, let's do the speedometer correction. Let's see, 8% we're going to put in just for the heck of it right now. All right. We will now save this and we shall upload it and see if it starts. So, uploading now. All right, let's give it a try, see if it fires up. Whoa. Whoops. All right, we have a check engine light, see what that is. Well, it's not telling me what my arrow code is, but well, guys, she's running. K24A1 CRV motor with supercharger. I'm expecting about 300 horsepower of this, but we're not there yet. We're gonna go ahead and conclude the video here today. We got it fired up. Time to do a little bit more though in order to get it ready for the dyno. So we got a list of things we gotta do. I gotta get the EPS running. For some reason, it's not even running right now. I need to do a CSS to VSS conversion. As a matter of fact, I'm gonna settle that question once and for all. I'm gonna show you what in the ECU needs to be changed and how to exactly adjust it so your CSS transmission puts out the proper signal for your VSS car. Now, next, we need to work on this intake right here. This thing is actually smaller than our K-Tune throttle body. That's no good. That's not gonna work at all. We also have to get our intake air temp sensor in there somewhere. Right now, it's just kind of hanging out in the open and not really measuring the air temp going through that. And the question is, do I want to actually take air temp inside this manifold, or is that just going to be depressing? Screw it. You know what I'm going to do? I'm going to do an E85 conversion. That's going to cool our fuel charge, and that'll help compensate for the fact that the supercharger is going to be making a lot of heat. Once we get all that done, we're going to head down to the dyno and we're going to see just what kind of horsepower it puts out. Again, I'm shooting for 300 horsepower. This has a good exhaust, got a good header on it, and we really should get 300 plus horsepower. One more thing, once we're done with that, I'm going to build a catalytic converter for this thing. The 3-inch size catalytic converter, that way we can get this thing through emissions and have it street legal. I want to go EVO hunting with this. Anyways, guys, if you like videos like this, please think about liking and subscribing, and go ahead and hit that bell so you get notifications when new episodes come out. You know somebody with a 2001 to 2005 Civic? Why don't you share this video with them? Show them what can be done with this car. And this swap is actually relatively reasonable other than the supercharger. Anyway, guys, thanks a lot for joining me, and we'll catch you next time on VTEC Academy.